Hello and welcome back to Mission Accepted. We are so glad that you're here and we have been listening. You have been sharing. Thank you so much. You know, I always say that you are the best podcast audience, and it's so much easier to say that when there isn't a host sitting across from me that has her own show. She's like, my audience too, my audience too. But you are loud and you share and you do all the things. I am so grateful, and so are the people that come onto the show. You know, it's almost like you're strategic. It's almost like you tell me things that you want because you really need them for your business, or you're thinking about braving up, but there's a mission going on. So look at, we have an incredible brand strategist with us today. But you know what? I've had an opportunity to meet Sheena. This is Sheena Katz, and she's an incredible brand strategist. But you know what? She's just a good people. She's just a good person. I met her. You probably watched the show Darren Darnborough, and she has a great relationship with Darren. And that's how I met Sheena. And I met Sheena in person when we took the book and the project to Emmys, which, you know, we are on our way to Oscars. So you know where she resides. But she has a colorful basket. I love that. A colorful basket full of experience that she takes to her business. Advisory boards, works with startups, plays in startups, all the things. She's super dedicated to her large community. I think she runs a podcast. She has good audience too. But anyways, I'm super excited about her talking about brand and strategy and entrepreneurship and just being a good human. So Sheena, welcome to Mission Accepted.
Thank you so much for having me. And what a great intro. I should just take you with me everywhere that I go. Lunches, dinners.
I'll come for lunch. Invite me for dinner and you know I'll be there. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Look, let's get into it a little bit. People don't know who you are yet. And I got to tell you, when you start letting people in our audience know who you are, they're going to hop on the Sheena train for sure. And they're going to start following you and supporting you, which we love. We're a very collaborative family over here. So tell us a little bit about, who you are, what got you going, what's inspiring you right now, because many of us do many things. So what's happening with you right now, and where did you come from and what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm a Californian, largely raised in Los Angeles, but I was originally born and spent the first 10 years of my life in North Africa with my Filipino parents. And my professional background is in corporate media, focusing on advertising and marketing sales. And I spent the last 17 years working for top entertainment brands like NBC, A&E, BBC, and MTV. So given my sort of professional background, I have found that my strengths really lie in the business and brand strategy side of things. And my personal background is sort of the, guiding light that leads me to the opportunities that I choose to work on these days. A lot of which involves consulting as a brand strategist, but also a lot of it with doing work and working with opportunities that empowers underserved communities. And that's actually what led me here, just because, I've seen all the work that you do to empower women and female entrepreneurs, which is incredible. And that's what really attracted me to your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We so appreciate that. It's good to know. You know what? It's interesting as someone, and because you also work with a community. I believe your show is for the Philippine community. I've been watching. Okay. So when you have someone that's stood by on the sidelines or watch what you're doing or has been affected in some way, it's always good to hear that feedback, right? Because you're doing what you're doing, and I call it the stretch of significance. None of us take on the quest of even one mission. Never mind, you are like this multi-mission. We in our world, we call you an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? Where you're multiple serving. And it's always nice to hear that it's being heard or shared or making an impression out there and inspiring other people to do whatever it is that they do. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I like that word, entrepreneur.
It's a good name, right? I'll tell you, I had this epiphany, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And I'm sitting on the couch and, me and all my pajamas and ponytail. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it was for a project. And I was like, what do I want to, entrepreneur, it's used a lot. And I was like, there's this whole thing. There was a big thing about just niche into one world. And I've been told that my whole life, and lots of surviving creatives have heard the same thing, right? Just stay in one vein and stay in one vein. And I was like, I've never been able to do that. And I'm like, I know, there's this great word, entrepreneur. And so I called a colleague and I'm like, they're like, that sounds fantastic. I'm like, oh my goodness, we just came up with a new word. So smart me goes onto Google and goes, what's an entrepreneur? And then you get this picture of Oprah, someone who builds multiple divisions. And I'm like, oh, so it's not a new word, but it certainly was a new concept. And I love it. I think it just lets you breathe and be who you are.
Yeah, I think of Oprah and Martha Stewart.
Mm. Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, I'm not a closet chef. I used to actually cook on film sets when I was younger. No one knew how to cook vegetarian cooking. So I get these desperate phone calls, like as vegetarianism was starting to hit the market. And I used to do, I mean, I have all these beautiful, what someone would consider cookbooks, but me and my son would just rip pictures out of magazines. I've never used a recipe in my life. And so we just love to create. But Martha Stewart, I used to just drool looking at her cake. She used to do like all these pretty crazy cakes. So I've attempted a few. They don't necessarily look like that. I've done I did a complete replica of my I guess no longer in-laws, but good friend in-laws bedroom. I remember making like, yeah, or a slot machine. I made a slot machine where money came out. That was kind of cool. But
Cool.
yeah, very cool, right? I better keep that hidden because people like, you should do it for a living. I'm like, I do it for people I know. That's it. That's it. But I'm sure people didn't come onto the show today to listen to me talk about how to make a slot machine cake. Let's get into it a little bit because you are on a mission and you support a lot of people, advisory board and support. But let's talk about, because you talk a lot, you do a lot of work with startups.
Mhm.
You play in the world of startups. Let's talk about how people, because you can be in a business and restart anytime. We're coming up to that time of year that people are going to be evaluating what did I do right? What did I do differently? We'll just put it that way. What do you see as people go into the market or decide to take on a new venture? What are some of the things that you see that they do that aren't overly like successful? So what are some of the things, I guess some would call them common mistakes, but
Yeah, I think two things come to mind right away. The first is the lack of a clear business plan. Your vision needs to be clear. The details can and will change later, but your vision has to be absolutely crystal clear. Um, and then the second one, which seems a little bit obvious, but is not, is ignoring market research. You know,
ooh,
that's a very, very common mistake that people make, myself included, because, when you get so focused on your vision, you don't think about whether there's a need for it. So there absolutely needs to be an appetite in the marketplace for what it is that you're producing in order for it to succeed. Um, that
that's
all said, though, I do want to note that we all make mistakes. There's going to be a lot of them. It's okay. Make the mistakes, learn from it, keep moving.
Can we dig into that a little bit? Because if you were to ask any entrepreneur or anyone that's starting a new venture, a lot of times they're like, I'm absolutely clear. I know exactly what I want to do. I want to build this. But when you say have a clear vision, are you talking time frame? Are you talking like all the pieces? Like what makes a clear vision clear? Do you know what I mean? Like someone's like, oh, I'm super clear. I've wanted to do this my whole life. Um, what kind of clarity? Like,
I think the clarity that I'm talking about is your why. Why do you want to do this? What is driving it? If say, even if it's something as simple as I want to make stickers. Okay, great. But why? Because they look pretty. Okay, but why? Because when I see a motivational sticker, it makes me feel good. And I know that other people can feel that way too. Get to your why. That's all that needs to be clear. Everything else will kind of fall into place.
okay, thank you. Thank you. That's important. And I think when you're talking about market research, I know that many times I've gone to do market research. Well, look at that, entrepreneur, and literally going to Google was beginning of, market research. When you say ignore market research, is it the kind of market research where you go and you find, oh my gosh, stickers are a $3 billion industry and da 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 da, and it starts to validate in a unrealistic way, or what is it about market research that can be misleading?
Um, well, I think it's actually very important to pay attention to it. A lot of people, I think the main mistake is ignoring it because you want to create stickers. So you're ignoring what the actual need is and you just want to create those stickers, right? So ignoring the fact that maybe the market doesn't need stickers right now, or maybe, I think paying attention to market research will give you an insight to trends that might and actually will help you. So maybe producing stickers for a regular coloring book isn't a thing in the market right now, but if you pay attention, there's more and more startups that are coming up every year. They need promotional items like stickers. So maybe you pivot that way, and that's how you tap into this niche and become successful. So paying attention to trends is why market research is so important.
That's good. That's really, really good. So stickers, let's talk about stickers. Let's talk about when people get excited about something that tends, I mean, there's always that one person that comes up with that one great idea that is pretty solo and pretty, you'll hear people like, wow, I've never heard of that before. That doesn't necessarily fall on everyone's lap. You start going into spaces that are kind of crowded, like stickers, or someone, oh my gosh, I'm going to start a jewelry company, or, a curling iron, or these are things that we know of. What are some of the advice that you can give around? I mean, because obviously you've sat at those tables, and things that have launched have not been new to the market. What about when something's what someone might consider saturated, or you're walking into a market that's really heavy?
No, that's a really great question. And I think in that case, what you want to focus on is differentiation, strategic positioning, and execution, right? So what does that look like? First and foremost, identify your niche, which sticker buyers are you looking for? Are you looking for the startups who are looking to promote their stuff? Or are you looking for school kids? Like, you identify your niche. From there, create a unique value proposition. What sets you apart than the other sticker company? Is it because you offer a variety of different types of stickers? Are they all matte, or are they all, you offer different kinds? And then once you create your unique value proposition, you lean into branding to really differentiate yourself, right? And branding is so, so, so important, which is why I do what I do. A good example that I like giving is, right now there are a lot of smartphones that are available. Some have better picture quality, some are better for recording. But every time that I need to get a new smartphone, I go to Apple and I get an iPhone. Why? Because their branding is impeccable. And I automatically believe that this is the cool brand to buy and it will have everything that I want and need. Does it? Probably, but who knows? Branding kind of does that. And that's really why I focus so much on brand strategy, and what I do is because it's what's going to differentiate you from everybody else. Because like you said, most product categories are pretty saturated. We're very fortunate to be in 2024 and have a variety of everything. So the likelihood of you going into a market where there's other things that already exist is very high. So all you need to do is differentiate yourself, and a lot of that is in branding.
Wow. And people hear that, right? So talk a little bit about, there's two things. One is people are, should I brand me? Look, we have a big stage, right? We have a lot of women. You talked about that. We have 220 women that step on our stage in a 12-month period. It's a lot of women. And they have this little internal thing. Should I be branding my company? Should I be branding me? How do I brand me through my company? I know that's a big question to ask you, Sheena, but do you find anything in either one of those veins that's better to do, or tie it together? Or people talk about personal branding all the time, and people are like, what does that mean? Is it what I look like? Is it what I sound like? If I sell a product, do I need to go stand on stage and let people know what I look like and can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And you're right. There is so much value to one's personal brand, right? And I think the simplest way that you can say that is your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room.
Ooh, okay, write that one down.
That is what your brand is. And in terms of how that connects to your business, because it is such a saturated marketplace in all genres right now, maybe not space, outside of space, everything else, because it's so saturated, a lot of what I see, a lot of the success of a lot of new companies right now is directly tied to the visibility of its founder.
Right.
The more authority that you have in those spaces, the better your personal brand is. And if you're linked to your company, the better they'll do. In today's in 2024, with social media, with PR, with everything that's happening, you're directly linked to your company. So your personal brand is tied to it. So there is value in promoting both.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And look at, I'm super excited, and I don't know how much it's been announced. I know that, you let me in on a lot of conversations. So please share with us, you are actually having to walk that walk right now. You have stepped into an area that there might have been one or two of them made before. Why don't you share with us from an insider view, like here's you deciding to go not only to help other people build brands, but now you've joined up and you are actually on the other side of your table. You're actually your own consumer. Can you share with us what you've got going on? And from an insider standpoint, what are some of the things that maybe you're doing that you can share that our, Mission Accepted listeners are like, man, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so my business partner and I are actually currently in the research and development phase of launching Vital Force. Vital Force is a performance wear brand developed for female strength athletes. So this will be athletic apparel designed specifically for women who do CrossFit, powerlifting, wrestling, weightlifting. So all the sports that has more of a focus on strength training. We'll be at the LA Fitness Expo in January, so that's kind of cool. And you're absolutely right. I'm on the other side of it now. And what I'm finding is kind of doing a lot of things at the same time. So the research and development phase can be a little bit of a lull, right? You're kind of testing things out. So while we're doing that, we're also working on our branding. So we're sponsoring local meets, we're sponsoring national competitions, we're kind of appearing in all the spaces to start building that authority. Like I mentioned, we're working on our personal branding because our CEO and founder is an athlete herself. So we're working on her personal branding, the brand's personal branding, while we're developing the actual product. So it's a little bit of juggling, right? So that's one thing that I found has been helpful, and I believe will be helpful, because ultimately, if you think about it, once you launch a product, once a new product is launched, most people, what they do is they Google our product, they look it up. And what you want to happen is for whether a lot of press or existing events to already pop up when your product launches. So a lot of it is working on branding on all sides of things. So it's really interesting. It's really fun working on it. We're kind of learning a lot about the industry, and we're going to be launching in the spring. So that's really exciting.
Ooh, I want to be invited to that launch. I'll have to do a little bit of more weights before I go. But seriously, I think I was having that conversation with myself today. Being behind a camera for 3 years with this project, in certain areas it shows, but the the transparency of TV. Talk a little bit about sponsorship, because that is an interesting model. So most companies, when they're first starting, the last thing they may look at doing is going and investing in sponsoring, right? They're like, oh my gosh, we need money, we need attention, we need people to sponsor into us. But that's interesting to get yourself. Now, can you talk a little bit about why you made that part of your, marketing formula?
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's not the traditional way to do it, right? Usually you launch your product and then you start sponsoring little events here and there to promote it. The reason that we started doing it kind of in tandem while we're developing the product is because, going back to our original conversation, it's such a saturated marketplace, athletic apparel. There's so much out there, but what we're going for is a very specific niche, right? It's strength. And this niche is not so widely known yet. So we made a decision that we need to start getting our branding and name out there even before we launch nationally. So a lot of our sponsorships now are kind of local. There's some national stuff, but mostly it's local, because the idea is when we do launch nationally, we want the core audience, our core niche, to already know about us. So it was definitely a decision that we made that's not the traditional route, but because of the marketplace that it is, we felt we needed to do it in tandem.
Well, I think sponsorship needs to be talked more about, because a lot of people, they don't understand what sponsorship is. I don't think they understand what sponsorship can bring them. And maybe let's have a conversation about that, because most people, you go to a hockey game, I'm in Canada, sorry. You go to a hockey game and, you see the sponsors all along, the boards. We see the big sponsors. And I think that when it comes to sponsorship, people's concern is it worth it? Like, can you share with people how do you make it worth it? Because it's kind of like, should I be in a collective book? Well, what is the ROI of that? Well, that usually is participating. So I don't want to go into your answers, but how do you make a sponsorship worth it if you decide to go into sponsorship? And how do you know that it's going to bring value, or is it on you to make sure it brings value?
Yeah, no, sponsorships are definitely worth it. And to make sure it's worth it, I would say is to really focus on your very specific niche. Obviously, we want to go broad to scale, but for sponsorship specifically, because you are putting some additional funds down, focus on the main people that you are going to be talking about your products. When you want to do something a little bit more scalable, you can do that later. That's one way to make sure that it's worth it for you, because ultimately, again, for example, in this case, it's fitness apparel for strength athletes. There are very specific niche that we need to make sure actually vouches for our product, because once we launch and we say, hey, this is athlete tested and strength athletes do vouch for it, that matters because that's kind of our stance. So depending on what your stance is and your niche product, as long as you kind of keep that tied together, that's how you can make sponsorships worth it. That said, it also depends on where you are with your product launch, right? Because you do have to earmark a certain amount of your funding for sponsorships. And a lot of that is really going with your intuition and your gut. Like, is this the right thing to do? And you know your product, you know your people. So if you feel like you need to be doing things in tandem, do it. But if you feel that you need to wait a little bit longer, that's fine too. It really depends on where you feel like your product is going to be launching and how it's going to be resonating with people.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways that you can sponsor, right? Like you're talking about one of the ways where you're actually getting your product on somebody. There's that there, and it could come along with financial. I mean, I would say to people, don't be afraid to pay for sponsorship. It's the same as paying for advertising. It is a form of marketing, right? And being able to have your logo or where it's seen, how many times it's seen, how many times we've had people in the summit, people sponsor, and how many summits and how many times are you talking about my book, and all of those things, how many media impressions that it's making, or how many impressions of that person wearing it. It's a very interesting world on sponsorship, endorsement, and then we get into, of course, the whole thing around endorsement. Is that someone shouting out on their social media, or is that, being, your name on a screen of an event or what have you? So it's so variety. Right.
And I think because of my background, that's probably why I think the way that I do, but there's absolutely value to all of that. We both know, just think about scrolling through social media. We all know that you need to see something at least 5 times within a span of a week before you do anything about it, whether it's like going on the website or just adding it to your cart. People are seeing a lot of messaging. You have to kind of stay on top of things if you want some action to be done there.
Yeah. And it's good to have somebody that's experienced that can walk you through it, because, marketing now is so vast, right? Like it's so vast and it can move quite quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's ever changing. Let's talk a little bit about, you do some advisory work. Some advisory work. What brought that on? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned I work with a lot of nonprofit just because it's another heart-led project that I'm passionate about. And a lot of it, one that I'm working on right now is the 4S Education Foundation, which provides mentorship and resources to higher education for high school students, mostly around the Los Angeles area. A lot of it is providing advice on how I would encourage them to grow their program. Because a lot of my, I guess, knowledge is in terms of how to grow something, how to scale something. So I got involved because the head of the organization is an old mentor of mine. But as I've kind of started going to meetings, I just started giving advice on how to grow their platform, get more sponsors actually to kind of get more for their students. So a lot of what I'm doing is what I've always been doing in my career, just in a different medium these days. A lot of it is with startups. A lot of it is with nonprofits. So it's funny. It seems like what I'm doing is different now versus before, but really it's very similar, just in an advisory sense, in a different category.
Well, I think that's really something for people to think about. Like, you have skills. We all have skills, whether we're starting a business or what have you. There's some natural aptitude. There's an area of your business you have natural aptitude. Maybe it was because you studied in it, you have a degree in it, or it just showed up as this natural skill, right? There's people that and to share that, whether it's through mentorship or getting on an advisory board or committee board, and it opens up a different conversation, right? It puts you, and I think that's important as someone who's working on business. You can get really stuck just working on business. And I think when you go and you take yourself and put yourself in a different platform and have that conversation, or you're skilled as part of a different forum, you get to see a different part of yourself and people get to see a different part of yourself. I think it's a really powerful form even of networking.
Exactly. And on the advisory board front, a lot of the value that I add there is kind of helping them raise funding. Because again, since I've worked on a lot of marketing and sponsorships, that's kind of my niche. So when I put my advisory board hat on, a lot of my advice there is how to raise funding for their startups, their marketing budgets, how to find ways to, bring their idea to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think expanding our reach and where we're visually being seen, right? Look, I know it's kind of time to wrap up, and you're going to be at this. Tell us a little bit about where you're going to be in January, where people can start to see your brand and or where you've got it so people can start to see, and also your services. Here's the thing that after being in business for a few days, right? And helping people in a certain section and brand being such a really interesting conversation is that I don't think I don't think anything's very templated anymore. I mean, even when you talk about, the definition of success has changed, right? It used to be very fiscal. And the world's moved to, yes, there needs to be financial return because that doesn't bring a whole lot of joy when you're banging against the door, right? I always say when there's more month left at the end of the money, that's not fun after a while, right? When you have those startups after a while. But the definition of success has changed. How we do business has changed. It's ever changing and it's very expansive. Your sector in particular, right? There used to be, used to advertise, used to be just called advertisement. And where were you going to go find your customers? Now there's all sorts of play on that. But tell us, because I know you're going to go to a trade event. Tell us about the trade event that you're doing. Tell us where we can find and learn more maybe about what you're doing. I'm sure I've seen your Instagram is fantastic, and how people can learn more about like hiring you and having you as part of their marketing team.
Yeah. So in January, at the end of January, Vital Force is going to be at the LA Fitness Expo at the LA Convention Center. So come by. We'll be there all weekend, at the last weekend of January, to kind of showcase our products and talk about our brand. Our CEO is also going to be competing in the powerlifting competition there. So that should be really cool. In terms of my services, so yes, I do a lot of consulting focusing on brand strategy and business strategy. And the best way to find me is through my website, sheenakatz.com. A lot of it starts off with a conversation. I kind of talk to, whenever anybody kind of inquires about working together or their project, the first question that I ask them is, what is your goal? Are you looking for more visibility? Are you looking for more sponsorships? Are you looking for funding? Let's focus on that goal, and then I can advise on how to get there. And a lot of that is tied to brand and their strategy and their business strategy side of things. So that's where I'm at. Come by and say hello and we can chat. And I'm happy to work with, what's going on in the marketplace.
Well, thank you for taking that next question out. Was when someone goes to talk to someone like yourself, what is it that they should know before they come? Even if it's, I know I need to know about this, but I don't, but I think it's a good direction. But like you said, you want to be able to ask, what is it that you're looking for? Even if it's not the right answer, if someone has an idea and they're like, well, I think influencer marketing might be good. And you're like, well, I actually think this form of marketing might be your better way to go. But what are some of the things in that area? We talked a little bit about startup and things that you should do, but from a marketing and branding perspective, is there anything people should really take a look at or answer questions other than what you just mentioned before they give you a call?
Yeah, I think the first things first is, what is your immediate goal? I mean, we all know the long-term goal is to be super successful and have this big business. Great. But what is your immediate goal? Let's start there. A lot of it usually is I need more funding, or a lot of it is I need to find a way to do more sponsorships and partnerships to get my name out there. And then from there, we develop a plan on how to get to that, and then the next steps from there. So I think a lot of people tend to come directly with their 5-year goal plan. It's like, that's great, but let's work with now. So the immediate goal to get you to the next step, and then the next step. And then from there, we can develop a more cohesive plan overall.
That's a fantastic answer. So I'm going to ask you a question that has absolutely nothing to do with this. I'm going to ask you a question about music.
Great.
We love music. Music is inspiring and motivating. And in it, you know what, I think they use it also in marketing quite a bit because it just really can fuel you and make and move you into action. But right now, what is the song or singer or album that if you were, if you were on your way to a desert island and you were packing that one suitcase and you had room for one vinyl, what are you taking with you that you could not imagine not listening to for the rest of your days?
Oh my goodness, Tina Turner. I mean, a more recent artist, I do love a good Sabrina Carpenter album, but I think all-time favorites to a desert island is Tina Turner, just because you can't not dance along to all those hits. I was just listening to The Best. That's usually my hype up song whenever I am about to jump into a call or something I'm a little bit nervous about, including this. I listen to The Best by Tina Turner just to hype me up.
Ooh, that's good. It's good to know, right? The one I love, I love music. I'm a bit of an addict. And I always say if I'm late for a meeting, it's because I couldn't stop listening to a song. There's no other reason. But it is my mental health break. It is that 5 seconds, 5 minutes. You rarely see me walking around town without my earbuds in, and I'm not just strolling and scrolling. I'm listening to some good, inspiring, motivational tunes. So thank you so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate that. And look at audience, I'm going to talk to you right now. This is a woman on fire. And, we've been on fire a little bit with these incredible women, and I'm so glad to see them on the other side of the screen. But look at, that we are coming up to International Women's Day. Our whole movement is about International Women's Day and the essence and the push and everything that 262 has done. We are on our way to the Oscars, to the hand gifting ceremony, to once again gift out this book. Now, the announcement's been made. You've watched this show. I'm sure I am repeating myself, but if you didn't know, we had 50 women of history holding space in this book till we came back from the Emmys, of which we did, and that's where I met Sheena. And look, you have an opportunity to be in the book. We only have 262 spots, and I know we don't have 50 left. We have some, but if you'd like to be in a book that's being hand gifted at the Emmys, the Oscars, and all the beautiful places in between for 5 years and come along this journey with us, we have some space for you. We always have space for you on the show. We are about 25% filled out because International Women's Day is going to be a big one for us. We've got some beautiful speakers. Probably about 40 of them, actually. So if you'd like to be on that stage, if you'd like to be on the podcast stage, if you'd like to be in this book or other publications that we do, we're all over here doing the mission accepted things. So if you took the mission, let us help you with that. You know how to reach out to me. It's pretty easy. It's my name. It's debdrummond.com. So it's not too difficult to find, or just Google me and you'll find my name and it'll pop up somewhere, I promise you. Sheena, what a pleasure to have you on today. I know that this isn't going to be the last time that we have you on the show. I absolutely want to see some of that footage. If we're not seeing you in January, I know that we'll be in LA for the Oscars time, and we'll have a chance to meet each other in person, and we'll do some cool stuff there. And I'm sure that from this show, you're going to have a lot of people, that is absolutely a incredible. I just love that you've niched something, and it's all about strong women in an interesting kind of way. So, we got to back that up. We got to back that up. So thank you for being with us today, hon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Okay. We will see you guys in a couple of days. You know it. So until we see you again, you be well and you stay groovy. Bye for now.